Hi, Alan Stratton from Woodturning. For today's projects, let's finish turning this bowl out of olive. Now, actually, I started this bowl 3 years ago and rough turned it, but as it dried, I saw all these things develop on it. There's some nice grain and some figure, some character, except that there's a lot of cracks and holes and loose knots involved with it. So I wasn't very anxious to finish it until I found a solution, and that is clear UV resin, which is quite nice. I'll explain more about that later, but now we can finish turning it and enjoy this beautiful olive figure.
This is a small block of olive that came from Arizona. Without ceremony, I lift the wood up to put the flat side against a set of chuck jaws that are closed. The wood will be pressed solely with live center pressure. This works when there is a flat side that can go against the jaws. Since the time of this rough out, I made a pin faceplate that provides more assurance against slippage. If there were not a flat side, I would have to use both a drive center and a live center and work for a balance. Working from the bottom is the best route forward. This way I can cut into side grain and eventually establish a continuous cut. With the bottom trimmed, much of the out-of-balance wood is removed, leaving excess wood at the perimeter. Here still, it is easier to cut from the bottom. If I were to cut directly perpendicular to the axis, it would be alternating end grain and side grain. Yeah, tougher cut. Then cut a tenon. Time to reverse the bowl. However, I am not confident about the stability of the axis, so this time I am cutting a mortise into the top surface. My mount is solid. All should be stable now. Now the bowl is reversed again in the same orientation as originally. I can continue shaping the bowl with a bowl gouge. I also need to again trim the tenon in case of any shift. My skew does a great job of forming a dovetail tenon. Now to reverse the bowl yet again. This is mount number 4. Usually I am only at 2 mounts at this stage, but when in doubt, well, I start with the live center in place but have to retract it quickly to allow hollowing. There is not much hollowing because I am leaving the walls quite thick for more drying. As the wood is cut away, I see a lot of small figures and voids. Ooh, I will have to deal with this later. When done, I coat it with a PVA-based sealer and store it in a paper bag for the initial drying stage. Periodically, I weigh the bowl and record the weight. This one has only lost 13% of its weight. Perhaps it was more dry than I thought when I rough turned it. Also, olive is very dense and heavy. Nevertheless, after the 3 years, I am confident it is dry. The wood has warped. It is about ½ inch out of round and about another ½ inch height difference at the rim. I waited a long time to finish this bowl because of all the knots, eyes, and small cracks. I am not sure how to deal with them. Maybe this will wind up as firewood after all. Olive is so pretty, that would be a shame. Now it is time, and I have a plan to salvage this bowl. Again, with jaws closed, I press the interior of the bowl against the chuck jaws with live center pressure. Yes, the jaws will mar the inside. However, I will be cutting this out anyway, so not a problem. First task is to recut the tenon. It is distorted and the PVA sealer is hard. Then work up the side with a shear cut using my bowl gouge. I also need to reduce the height of the rim before finalizing the profile. It would be bad news to work the curve up the side and then find that I needed to cut down the rim. Then, with the rim established, I can finalize the profile. After reversing the bowl, the axis has probably shifted again. I take a few scraping cuts with my skew and a round nose scraper. My live center is covered by a number 6 rubber stopper that I have drilled to fit over the live center threads. Now I can finish the hollowing. The first cuts remove the residue of the sealer, then periodically measuring to check the wall thickness. My target is a consistent 3/8. This is the fun part. Chips fly. Adrenaline flows freely with the risk of blowing up the bowl with a catch. After all this work and waiting, will I be rewarded? Still, those cracks, voids, and eyes bother me. Inspection reveals a loose knot, cracks, and voids. Oh my. I recently discovered clear UV resin. This may be the solution to my problem. UV resin cures when ultraviolet light shines on the resin. This means that I can squeeze out a small bead, then expose it with ultraviolet light from a small UV flashlight. This flashlight is not very powerful. The best it can do is to start the process and prevent the resin from running off. Then I can add more layers to build up thickness. This time I use a paperclip to poke resin down into the small voids. I like to leave the bowl with resin outside in direct sunlight, but right now it is cold and snowy outside. As an alternative, I put the bowl on a sunny windowsill, rotating it periodically to better expose it. Now to finish the bowl. This time, I am relying on scrapers to cut back the resin bumps and take a minimum of additional wood. For the interior, this is my heavy bowl scraper. For the exterior, I use my skew as a scraper and a round nose scraper for the small cove under the rim. With the skew, I try to keep the skew's cutting edge tangent to the curve at the middle of the cutting edge. I also keep it moving to avoid flat spots. This cuts back the proud resin bumps. After sanding by hand with 120 and 180 grit, I decide to continue sanding with walnut oil with 220 and 320 grits. This reminds me when, as a teenager, I had summer jobs sanding cars in a body shop. Then we only used power sanders for coarsework. We would then use wet sanding blocks on rough areas and wet hand sand old paint to allow bonding. It took years until I had fingerprints again. Wet sanding was with water from an open hose. Now with walnut oil, I do not have an open hose. I squirt a little on the sandpaper or directly on the wood, then sand by hand, keeping the paper moving and refreshing the oil regularly. The speed is slow enough that oil is not flying from the rim. Plus, when finished, no additional finish is needed. There are many ways to finish the foot. Since I have cool jaws, this is my current favorite way to trim the foot. First, measure to see how nervous I need to be about the final thickness. Plenty of reason here. The main problem is that at a low RPM is required for the cold jaws. I start with a spindle gouge. The olive is hard and tough. A short sprint with the bowl gouge helps. Then finish up with a spindle gouge and a skew as a scraper and a round nose scraper. I want a very short ridge as a bottom and with a concave interior. Any project worth doing is worth signing and dating. Maybe long after I have passed, this may become a famous and valuable collectible. Well, I can dream, can't I? A Dremel engraver that is designed for metal does a great job for me. I generally sign after all sanding. But after signing, there is raised wood that I do not want. A little more wet sanding with oil smooths out the surface. Finally, a new bath in walnut oil to ensure complete coverage. The UV resin does a great job of filling the loose knots, voids, and scratches, at least those that would be a distraction. There are enough left to provide interest and companionship to the figure. A voila! Not firewood, but a potential keepsake. I love it. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe on my website, and tell your friends about my videos. I appreciate your comments and questions. Every week I add a new wood turning video to my website. Please always wear your full face shield anytime the lathe is running, because it can save your life.